Picture yourself in a packed room. You know the kind, right? There's constant noise, laughter, conversations just firing rapidly in every single direction. Everyone is talking loudly, fast, and, well, constantly. But then, you notice them. The quietest person in the room. Sitting over at the edge, perfectly calm, just observing. They aren't fighting for attention at all, yet somehow, their silence carries this profound, magnetic weight that you literally just can't ignore. Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to dive deep into the fascinating psychology and neuroscience behind this exact phenomenon. Before we start decoding the hidden secrets of silent power, make sure to like this explainer, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who really needs to hear it. Okay, let's dive in.
So, it's a supernatural question to ask. Why does the quietest person instantly draw your attention? For so long, society has fed us this myth. The myth that quiet people are just shy, aloof, weak, or totally lacking confidence. But the truth is actually the exact opposite. Your brain recognizes something way before your conscious mind even catches up. It instinctively senses that their silence isn't an absence of strength. It's actually a massive, concentrated dose of it.
All right, let's look at part 1, the illusion of noise, or volume versus value.
We live in a society that basically conditions us from day one to believe that volume equals value. And honestly, it's made us terrified of the quiet. Take the number 15, for example. In this incredibly famous study by Timothy Wilson at the University of Virginia, participants were given a simple choice: sit alone in a room in total silence for 15 minutes or receive an electric shock. Astonishingly, a huge number of people actually chose the physical pain of an electric shock over just facing 15 minutes of silence. No way, right? People are literally terrified of quiet because it forces them to face their own thoughts. Contrast this with someone like Viktor Frankl, who survived concentration camps and discovered that true, unbreakable freedom is found precisely inside that inner silence. Moving on to part 2, the biology of silence. Let's take a look inside the quiet mind. So what's actually happening inside a quiet person's brain? Well, it's not just some random personality quirk. This often begins super early in life. Sometimes a child learns to retreat into observation simply because observing feels a lot safer than participating. If they grew up around unpredictable adults or in chaotic environments, their nervous system literally rewired itself to monitor every tiny shift in the room. A tightened jaw, a sudden pause. Attachment theorists recognize this as a self-protective, avoidant response. For them, silence becomes a sanctuary. And if you look at the biology, the difference in how we process the world is wild. Extroverts absolutely thrive on massive dopamine spikes. Social stimulation is basically fuel for them. But a highly sensitive, quiet brain, it operates completely differently. Their amygdala, which is the brain's alarm and processing system, fires so much more intensely. So all that chaotic external input that extroverts constantly crave can actually cause massive cognitive overload for a quiet person. They really don't need noise to feel alive. They already feel the impact of a room incredibly deeply. And this brings us to how they actually process information. The renowned psychologist Daniel Kahneman maps out 2 systems of thinking. Loud, constant talkers are very often relying on system 1. It's fast, it's impulsive, and it's pretty surface level. But quiet people, they live almost entirely in system 2. It's slow, it's deeply analytical, and it is highly accurate. They aren't just holding back words for the fun of it, they are processing reality at a much, much higher resolution. So let's get into part 3, the observer's advantage, and how this becomes a strategic weapon. All that intense internal processing we just talked about, it translates into some incredible external power. The absolutely crucial thing to understand here is that a quiet person's silence is never, ever passive. It's an active state of intelligence gathering. While everyone else is busy broadcasting their every passing thought, the quiet person is sitting back, collecting data, remaining totally comfortable in uncertainty, and operating without that desperate need for outside approval. Author Susan Cain highlights some truly fascinating research on this. When you're speaking, your brain activates the Broca's area, which is the center of speech production. But here's the catch, and this is wild. When this area is active, your ability to deeply process incoming information actually drops. By choosing to stay quiet, these individuals keep their brains in a deep scanning mode. They're actively reading the pauses, analyzing the microexpressions, and spotting the contradictions between what someone is saying and what their body language is secretly revealing. And because they aren't constantly talking just to seek validation from the room, they operate with what psychologist Nathaniel Branden calls an internal locus of control. They don't throw words out there like fishing hooks, begging for a laugh or a nod just to prove they exist. Their self-esteem is completely forged internally. This makes them incredibly stable and, frankly, almost impossible to manipulate. Let's move to part 4, the weight of words and why scarcity creates value. There's a basic economic principle at play in human communication. Scarcity creates value. Ernest Hemingway famously coined the iceberg theory for his writing, but man, it applies perfectly to the quiet mind. Think about it. When a person who rarely speaks finally opens their mouth, the entire room just comes to a standstill. It's not just empty talk. It's the powerful, sharpened tip of a massive underwater iceberg. It's the perfect distillation of hours of deep observation, all compressed into one single piercing sentence.
According to Daniel Goleman's research on emotional intelligence, managing that immediate impulse to speak out loud is a massive indicator of high EQ. Quiet people unconsciously run basically every thought through a rigorous 3-step filter before it ever leaves their mouth. First, is it true? Second, is it necessary? And third, does it actually improve the situation? If the answer to any of those is no, they just remain silent. This discipline preserves their power, keeps their cards close to their chest, and inherently surrounds them with this undeniable aura of mystery.
Which brings us to part 5, the power of presence, or what we can call silent charisma. You have undoubtedly felt this before, but maybe you couldn't quite put a name to it. It's that realization that physical presence can absolutely outspeak volume. As the teacher Eckhart Tolle observes, true power is rooted in being intensely present. Quiet people aren't distracted by frantically formulating their next sentence. They hold steady eye contact. They actually see you. In a world where practically everyone is obsessively focused on themselves, being fully, truly seen by a quiet person is incredibly magnetic. It's a genuine, unfakeable charisma built purely on the density of their presence. Finally, let's explore part 6, reclaiming quiet strength and bridging the gap. We have to acknowledge that every strength casts a shadow. For many, this silence can sometimes morph from a protective shield into a pretty lonely prison. So how does a quiet person safely bridge that gap between their rich inner world and the loud outside world? Well, psychologists highly recommend a practice called affect labeling. By simply identifying and naming their emotions, quiet people can drastically reduce the intensity and cognitive overload happening in their nervous system. It's all about safely translating the overwhelming depth of what they feel into small, honest fragments of expression, completely without needing to become loud or performative. The legendary psychologist Carl Jung believed that quietness is actually a profound countercultural strength. In a society that is completely obsessed with surface-level visibility and making noise, the quiet person is bravely confronting their inner truth. They aren't hiding from reality, they are facing it head-on in the stillness, forging an incredibly resilient and unshakable identity. If you are a quiet person watching this, you really need to realize that your silence was never emptiness. It's depth. You carry the rare wisdom of patience and the sharp intuition of the observer. You leave soft yet completely unforgettable imprints on the people around you. You aren't the thunder, you're the grounded shakes. You are the calm that reveals what truly matters, long after all the noise finally fades away. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Will you continue to let the world's loud, chaotic noise drown out your powerful signal? It is time to stop apologizing for your silence and start wielding it as the profound strength it was always meant to be. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. If this resonated with you today, please hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into the human mind, and share this with someone who needs to finally recognize their own quiet power. Until next time, stay curious.